Welcome back to ARC Tutorials. This is HTML full tutorial series for absolute beginners. In the last few episodes, we started learning about the HTML forms. Forms consist of various elements that are used to accept the user input. In that, especially input has different types that are often used in building a form. We are going to learn all about them in this episode. Let's get started. This is part 24 of the series. If you have missed out on the first 23 parts, make sure that you go through them in order to have continuity to your learning. Today we are learning about HTML input types. You can take a screenshot of this particular image or refer this video whenever you want to learn end to end. These are the top 18 different types of inputs that can be used in building a form. I'm going to show each one of you in hands-on right now because it's much easy to visualize and see the output rather than just talk. But an overview, input type equal to text will give you a text box. Password is used to conceal the entered data. Checkbox is for checkbox. Radio button is used to choose only one from a list of options. Submit button is used to submit the data and send the data to the server. Reset will help us reset all the fields in the form. File will help us upload a file. Number will restrict it to numeric values. Range will create a slider. Similarly, date will help us pick date. Time is used to input time using a time picker. Email address will validate that the input is a properly formatted email address. Similarly, when you are providing a telephone number which is clickable, you can write tel. URL indicates the input is a valid URL. Search again puts a typical magnifying glass to indicate that it's a searchable field. Color will generate a color picker. Hidden will conceal the input to be hidden. These are the top 18. Right now let's go ahead and put our in the form. Okay, so let's go pick up the form. I'll empty it for you and then we will write one by one the 18. So you can use this high level thing and say form group, right? So it's a group basically that you're grouping a label and say username, and you can put an input type equal to. Now there are different options. You can see there are so many different options for input. Let's start one by one. I'm putting text first, and you can add a placeholder and say enter username. This is for the input. Save it. Now similarly, let me show you the output first of this. So when you go here and refresh, you see one field and a label which will say that this is a input type equal to text. We can style them however we want. Similarly, you can give something like form group and group things together. Similarly, I'm adding a label and I'll say email address and input type equal to email, and you can add a placeholder and say enter email address. Alright, so now see, this is an email address. So if you enter something, it will accept, but when you add and submit, it can do validation, especially using the JavaScript. Okay, so those are the things that you can add. Now the next thing you can do is add a div again. I'm going to style it in just a bit, so hold on to that. It may not be looking good now, but we will make it look better. So let me quickly show you all the variations first. So password and input type equal to password, placeholder, enter password. You can also set some default values if you want, but using the value attribute, but I'm not adding that here. Let's quickly build. So now you know that I'm using the same layout of div and form group, so I can just do a copy paste from now on to save some time for you. Now this, we have used 3 now so far. Input type equal to text, email, password. Let me show you the output in just a bit. Label and say hidden. So this is a very important thing, especially now you can set some value and close the input. Now see, in the form you are only seeing three fields, right? If I remove this label, you will not see anything, but if you see in the view source, that value is there, right? That means when you say it as hidden, it will be hidden. Okay, so let me quickly style it up. I'm going to use internal style for now, and I'm going to say if it's a form group, right, width should be 100%, and I'm saying inside form group, wherever you have label, width should be say 200 pixel, right? And inside this we are going to group it, and we are going to say min width, or we can also say width say 20%, but that's not working. But anyway, let's continue, and form group. Okay, and inside this I can use some other selector. That's not working. We have different ways of how we can target, so let's try different way to see if we can target that. That's doesn't seem to work, but instead we can give a class then here, and I'm going to call it LBL, which is for label, and assign that, and assign that. And here I'm going to say LBL width should be 200 pixel, and let's see if it's getting applied or getting overridden. So if I explore this, if I check this, let's check the value. So you can see here it says the display inline property prevents from having it. Okay, so clearly it says display inline. Okay, so instead what we can do is label display block, and so now we can have it in a single form like structure, and for each I'm going to say margin bottom should be 20 pixel, so there is gap here, and we can also put here say margin bottom 10 pixel for the label, so that way they look much more readable. And we can add some background color and say FC, see, let's see, right? And there is a slight light color background you can see, but for now I'm going to use a light say cyan color, right? So this is a form. Now we can give some padding also at the bottom, 10 pixel, so there is some nice gap around it, right? So you can keep on decorating it as and when you like the style. For the input, if you want to style, you can just add form group input, and you can say font size should be 18 pixel, and so see, now they have become little bigger. There are again different variations of how we can style and decorate and put on focus, what color, etc. So we can do that. So I'll show you in a quick example, then we move on to learning. If it's focused, we'll say border should be 2 pixel solid blue. Okay, let's say blue color. So now see, when I click on it, it is blue color, right? Now if you want to change the color and say red, when especially when it's not validated right on input, then you can also say put active. Okay, so that's not taking. Instead we can uh, focus, it should be ideally. Okay, we'll fix that later. I'm not spending time on CSS, but rather on the input types. So let's continue building our input types. We saw text, we saw email, we saw password, we saw hidden. You can also write color, so this would be a color picker. Okay, now color picker, so see, now it brings up this nice color picker. Same way you can also copy the div again and paste it again. So I'm trying to show you all the variations that can be possible with input type. So now you see it gets you a nice calendar to pick the date and time. This is date picker. Same way you can use input type, and then you can also have time. So now this will help you pick hours, minutes and seconds. Okay, AM, PM along with that. So that's another nice variation, especially helpful when you're building an enterprise application. All of this can be styled, so don't worry about that. If you want to give a certain class to the inputs, right, input box, right, and you can style it accordingly, the width, the, so let's say input box, and you step out and alright, so we'll fix the CSS, but let's keep building the inputs, and then we can style them as we move along. Alright, so the next we have so we covered input type equal to text, password, email, hidden, color, date, time, um, and then what else? Let's check in the list. You don't have to remember telephone, email, URL, search, file. Yeah, so you have file. So you can just say input type equal to file, and that should bring you a file, open file, right? Choose file. That will bring up the browse model window where you can choose the file. The next you have is the URL, right? URL field. So this is URL. So now you need to enter. Again, these are mostly from the validation perspective when you use with JavaScript. Okay. Similarly, you can use a telephone and provide a value, right? 6789. So this is again, if you see, input type. So this goes with basically a href and input type equal to rel. So then it will be more of a clickable element. But you can definitely use these semantic web to define that it's a telephone number and etc. So it will validate once you submit the form. Alright, so those are all the different forms that are there. We saw color, hidden, we saw URL, telephone, email, date, time. Let me quickly show you range as well. So input type equal to range, range picker. Okay, so range would look like this. I don't know if you can see it at the end, so I'm going to move it at the top so that you can clearly see it. Alright, so you can see range is more like a slider where you can define the min and max values and fix that particular interactive element. Okay, so those are all the different input types that you can use. Okay, there are some more. Let me put it at the top again. I wanted to cover this separate, but since we are already in the learning about the form, I'm going to show you that. So it's called a select drop down. You have select, then you put options, say country, right? So you can choose the countries that from the list: USA, UK. Okay, so it will give you a drop down to choose from. Okay, now again there are different variations of how you want to style them. Okay, so don't worry about styling, worry only about learning the options. Okay, on that note, let me also show you checkbox and radio. So let's say you have input type equal to say radio, and you would choose an option mail here, right? So you can choose that option, correct? Now in this, the thing is, if you give the same name, you would be able to choose only one option. Okay, so here I'm saying name, gender. That's very important. If you don't give this, let me show you what happens. You can select both, okay, but you can't be both at the same time. So um, so you will give a name. That's when it will know to group it. So you give name, gender. Now you select one, and the other gets unchecked automatically. Okay, so that's the radio button. The last that I want to show you is not the last but one. The next I will show you is a checkbox. So checkbox, pro user, admin, right? So now checkbox will give you multiple selection, whereas radio will give you only one selection. Okay, so that's the thing about radio and checkbox. The last, you will need to submit the form, so you will need a submit button. So you will do a form group and write input type equal to submit. So this will submit the form, and you'll give value and say submit form. If you check at the end, here is a submit button, right? Similarly, if you want to submit it via Ajax or a JavaScript code, not reloading the entire page, we can use button. Okay, button behaving as submit. Okay, now button can be used for multiple purposes like on click or something like that. So you have two buttons right now here in the page. Alright, so that covers us all the inputs that we have seen. Practice them. These are extremely important. In if you open up any application, any form, these are the things that you would see in a typical form, right? And hence it's very important for you as a beginner who is learning HTML to learn, see them visually and practice them. All right, that's all for today. In the next episode, I will cover and talk about the HTML input attributes, and that's how you can add those attributes to the input elements like this placeholder. This is one of an attribute of input, right? That's one. We will also do some advanced styling and make our form even better. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining in this episode. I'll see you in the next one.